Hey everybody, welcome to Flag for Discussion, episode 5 for Tuesday, May 13th. My name is Farbod and Jace. He's Jace Hatfield. We've got a truly loaded show for you today. I honestly believe that every show that you listen to will tell you they're locked and loaded, they're jam-packed. Today's show is no different, Jace. We found a lot of topics. We're going to start off talking about the 16-team college football playoff proposal that's been released this past week. For our listeners who don't know a lot of college football, we're going to talk about what even is it? Why do people hate it? Why do people love it? Then we're going to get into a couple of week one previews. I know it's early. I know week one's not for a long time from now, but in the past week we've had a lot of information that's been released on two specific major big games that could have major ramifications on the college football season. So we want to preview those, and then we're going to become an official sports show, Jace. We're going to have our first ever top 15 lists that we're going to rank our teams. So as we get into the regular season, and we'll get into a little bit more at the end when we get to the segment, but as we get closer to the regular season, we'll have a bigger top 25 flag for discussion list. But today, as spring ball has wrapped up for a lot of teams, we want to really try to give you where we think teams stack up, the top 15 teams in the country. I've talked a lot already. It's only about 2 minutes in. I want to, however, do what we've been doing every time now, and let's plug our socials. Follow us on Twitter, F for Discussion, YouTube, Flag for Discussion, and TikTok, flagged the number 4 Discussion. And we're also everywhere you can find your podcasts. We're on Apple Podcasts, we're on Spotify, we're on Audible. I want to give a special prompt, a little bit of a homework assignment to our viewers and listeners today. Specifically for this show, we ask, please go check out, if you're listening on Apple Podcasts or Spotify or Audible, there's a little bit place where you can go give us a 5-star rating. If you like what you hear today, it would truly mean the world if you just give us a quick 5-star rating. Jason and I were talking off podcast about, we knew we were lucky. We knew we had a lot of support from our friends and family off of this podcast before we started this venture. But it's truly been mind-blowing and eye-opening for us to see how lucky we are to see the support we've already gotten. So now that we've covered all of those bases, Jace, how are we doing? This past weekend, we finally got to see each other for the first time in 4 years.
Yes, my girlfriend and I made a trip out to LA, spent Friday with Farbod and his lovely fiance Morgan, and it was a great time. Farbod was diving into some tiny drinks, if you will. I think we might have a photo.
I like
There it is. Beautiful.
You know, the best part of this image is that, okay, first of all, if you're listening on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, this is your sign to tune into us on YouTube as well. But because sometimes we'll have little stories or little fun stuff like this. But the best part of this, obviously, Jason and I hadn't seen each other in about probably 4 years. We went to school together. Then I moved to Southern California, moved to New York, moved back to Southern California. He moved to Chicago. And we've talked pretty much every day online or over phone, but we hadn't seen each other. My favorite part of this image is after 4 years and after the very fun day we had together, we didn't even decide to take a flag for discussion, like photo of the two of us to even show on this podcast, put out on social. We'll get better at that next time.
Yeah, it's very us. We're both terrible at taking pictures. If you ever ask me, how was a trip? Let me see pictures. I'll have like two, like a blurry picture of a drink, probably like a picture just like that, or it'll be an accidental picture of my feet. I'm terrible at it, but we didn't get anything good. We do have a photo with our girlfriend slash fiancés here, so that's our only good one. But none of it just us two.
No, it was that's definitely something I rely on my better half for just pictures. Right before we hopped on here, I was like, do you by chance have anything of Jason and I? Not that I remember us taking a picture together, but I was just hoping that she had something. Lo and behold, no. All good. Let's get into this. So, Jace, we are in a time of change and constant turmoil in college football. Up until 2 years ago, the playoff was only a 4-team structure. And for those that don't know, there's a committee that basically selects the 4 teams that make the playoffs based on strength of schedule, record, who they've beaten, performance in those games. Sometimes there's eye
Hmm.
tests involved. This past year, we moved to a 12-team playoff structure. So the 4 major conferences, their champions got an automatic top 4 seed, and then the top group of 5 champion also got in. We moved forward from there, and the committee selected the rest of the teams. Now they're planning on proposing a 16-team playoff structure, and this is different than the 14-team that they were thinking about introducing. But do you want to give everyone a little bit of insight on what the 16-team would look like?
Yeah. So if you remember in the 12-team playoff, there was automatic bids for the big conferences, and then there was group of 5 spots, as Farbod mentioned. So in the 16-team playoff, I have this written down because it's a lot of implications here. The Big Ten and the SEC would each get 4 teams guaranteed. The Big 12 and the ACC would each get 2 guaranteed. The top group of 6 champion would also get a spot because we're including the new Pac-12 now into that. And then that would be 3 like bids up for grabs, presumably like a Notre Dame if they have a good season, and then 2 other teams. It can be Group 5, it can be any of the Power 4 conferences. So that would be your 16. Within the Big Ten and the SEC, you would have the top 2 teams would automatically make it. That's without what they don't have to play a game. They'll still play each other in their conference championship, but they're both are going to make it. So you can lose that game and it's still fine. The in that case, so the other 2 spots are going to be a play-in bracket. You would have a 3 versus 6 in both the Big Ten and the SEC. They would play each other, and then you would have the 4 and the 5, and they would both play each other. The winner of those 2 games would move on, and that would make up your 4 from each of those conferences. The other 2 that had lost those playing games would still have a shot to make it in that, 3, just whoever they're going to pick of those teams. And then the Big 12 and the ACC, no automatic bids in terms of like where you place in the regular season. You would have 1 versus 4, winner of that moves on, 2 versus 3, winner of that moves on. Again, the 2 that lost would be open for that 3 extra spots there. And then group of 6, they just take all of the conference champions from that and they pick the highest ranked / the one that they feel is the best, and that team will get inducted or get selected as well. So that would be your 16 teams if they were to move on to
So a
this.
lot. There's
Yeah,
there's a
yeah.
lot that goes into it. One of the first things to point out is it will essentially kill conference championship Saturday for as we know it.
Mhm.
For those of us that love what conference championships have been, especially since they've become a bigger thing in college football. Essentially, like you said, the top 2 teams will advance to the college football playoff from the major conferences. So I guess that introduces the question of, do we like the fact that a 3 versus a 6 or a 4 versus a 5 still has a chance to be in our playoff? Because college football playoff, for everyone who was fighting for expansion, one of the biggest arguments for it the last couple of years was screwing inclusivity. We don't. The point of the college football playoff is to get the best of the best in there, and there's a reason we, as college football fans, are so diehard. Why we take losses so hard. We're during the regular season. Why a week 2 loss could kill your season is because if you didn't have a perfect resume back in the day, you wouldn't be able to have a shot at playing for a national title. So I guess my question at that point is, how do you, not that we can't put the toothpaste back in the tube. We can't go back to a 14
Mhm.
playoff. We can't even go back to BCS. We are at a 12-team playoff looking at 14 or 16. Where does this become most successful? Well, how does this hurt college football? That's my concern in general.
Yeah, it's there's two very big camps obviously forming of people that love it, people that hate it. The people that love fun games and just want to watch games for entertainment value, I think 16-team playoff sounds great. It's even math that always makes it nice. You got 16 teams. It's a lot of football games plus the playing games add another level in with the conference championships. But to answer your question, I think the negatives of this kind of stem from you do potentially kill the meaning of a conference championship. Last year we kind of already saw that get downgraded a lot when all of a sudden people are starting to question seedings and winning and losing that game. This just adds a whole nother element to it. Depending on when these games are played, do you even want to, if you're guaranteed that spot, do you even want to play your starters? Are you going to try and play seeding? Is that smart to do? So that raises a lot of questions in and of itself. And then, yeah, last year, the sixth place SEC team, there was, I believe, like 4 or 5 teams tied at 5-3 in their conference. Uh, Two of those teams would have been guaranteed a playoff spot, and 5-3 in conference play is not very impressive. And I also think it adds a lot of, I don't want to call it luck, but for the sake of not having a great word for it, I'm going to call it luck. Those years where you dodge, in the Big Ten, if you dodge Ohio State and Oregon in a year, and the SEC you dodge Georgia and Bama, those are years that if you just go 5-3 and not play the two or three of the best teams in your conference, you have no excuses to not make the playoff. And at that point, if we're letting in teams who maybe aren't as qualified to be in the playoff, are we just expanding it for money? When in reality, like
Yes.
last year, you're gonna have a bunch of blowouts in the first round. Yeah, that it's
And
very much a yes. So, uh, it makes for a lot of good football potentially, but it also could just result in us having an 8-4 SEC team get in there and get dog walked by 11-1 Clemson, and that's that. So,
yeah,
it yeah, there's I can see both sides of the argument, but that's the negative.
I think as you know from me, and as the listeners will soon hopefully start figuring out about me, is I'm more of a college football traditionalist as it gets. One of the reasons I think everyone falls in love with college football, take your NFL take, and I know you and I have talked about this in the past. You're a Lions fan, right? But
Yes.
you aren't a Lion. We're gonna have to deal with my camera cutting. I'm gonna go to you real quick. But you're a Lions fan, right?
Yep. Usually a
So
good thing, or usually a bad thing. Sometimes good.
usually a bad thing, but you're not a Lion. Like it's been something that's been embedded in you since the beginning. Obviously, you feel like you're a diehard part of the fan base, but
Hmm.
the difference between that and a college football fan is when you go to a school, you're part of the alumni base, you're part of the student section, you're a Trojan.
Yeah.
You're a bulldog. You're a gator. You're a duck. And I think,
You literally put in the blood, sweat, tears, money.
yeah, lots of money. But in general, there's a lot more natural, visceral emotion involved in your attachment to your fandom of those teams. So that's why, in general, when your team loses week 3 in a heartbreaking game, or a game they're not supposed to lose, or a massive game that came down to the final wire, there's been moments that I know, like, fans just shut off for a couple days, and that sounds silly,
Hmm.
but fans just shut off to kind of regroup, try to process the loss in general. With this 16 team playoff, what I don't like about it is the fact that you are essentially losing that. Oklahoma and Michigan play early in the season this year. Both of those teams are looking to recover from pretty down years. Oklahoma, I think you and I are
Hmm.
pretty high on. Michigan, we'll see where the quarterback situation is and how they fill in the kids they lost to the draft. But they could be good too. But all of a sudden, that one loss 4 or 5 years ago, even 3 years ago, could have been the reason they didn't make the playoff. And then now you're those whoever loses in that game is going to basically say, their head coach is going to say, we have all of our goals ahead of us and we can handle everything.
Hmm.
So the natural visceral emotion, the natural like agony or the joy of winning those early season regular season games is going to be essentially gone. And if it isn't already with the 12 team playoff, it's going to be gone with the 16 team. On the other side of it though, you're setting up for some damn good games in the in the postseason, and that's like
Yeah.
you said where the money's at. You're gonna get a team like Indiana last year, who a lot of people thought didn't deserve to be in the playoff because they didn't play anybody, but they just had a really good record against pretty paltry opponents.
Hmm.
That team will have to prove itself. They would be playing the 3 versus 6, what, 4 versus 5 and three
Yeah,
versus
they
six
finished third.
games. And if they
Hmm.
earn their spot in with those games, no one can say they didn't deserve it. So that's wonderful. And
Yeah.
that Saturday is going to have all the agony, all the triumph feelings that you lose throughout the regular season. But I guess like for me, I'm still part of me still like hesitant on doing it because I love college football as it is.
Yeah, there's a real chance that those 3, 6, 4, 5, and then one, those games are some of the best games you get until like the college football playoff semifinal. Because I don't think the 1 versus 16 will be super interesting. The parity in college football can be strong. We've seen times where you have 2 or 3 juggernauts, and then it kind of falls off from there. So it's going to be, you're probably going to get a lackluster first round, maybe even a little bit of a lackluster second round. So those 3, 6, 4, 5 games are probably going to be the most exciting football you watch for a month until we finally get back into that semifinal. And having your team play in one of those would be terrifying. They haven't announced if those games would be neutral site or if they would be, played at the home team stadium. Something Farbod and I discussed off the pod, but I think it would be very fun to have those played at the home site of the higher seed or the better seed. I feel like if you are finished as the 3, you deserve to have a little bit of respect for your regular season. It's going to be hard to finish third in the Big Ten or the SEC. I think you deserve to have a little bit of a benefit for doing that. And then same thing with the ACC, Big 12, finishing first. I think you deserve that. In the past for all these conferences, normally the conference championships are played at a neutral site. Maybe they just keep doing that for the 1 versus 2 game. And then for those, I think you got to play at the home, just like they did in the first round of the playoff for the 12-team playoff this past year.
Yeah, I think that has to be a non-negotiable. We saw how
Hmm.
special that was. Seeing Tennessee go up to Ohio State in Ohio in at the shoe, and
Neyland North, as they called
yeah,
it.
Neyland North. They tried to call it that, and it still didn't work. I'm trying to pull up the Big Ten standings from this past year, just as an example. So technically, as the standings stood out for the Big Ten in general, last year, if we had a 16-team playoff, Oregon, I said Indiana, but for the 3-6, Oregon and Indiana would be the top 2 seeds.
Okay.
Because Oregon went 9-0 in conference, Indiana went 8-1. So those 2 teams would automatically get bids to the college football playoff 16-team version.
Did Penn State not finish too?
Penn
Just because
State
they played each other in the.
tied with Indiana at 8-1. So I'm just looking at the standings in general. They're on the
Okay.
Big Ten website. They're 1 spot lower than Indiana. So I'm not sure exactly the reason why we should have done this research beforehand. But
It's fun
as
hypotheticals. So
yeah,
who's the 6?
so then Penn State would be 3, and they would play 6 Iowa.
Oh,
2, 3,
okay.
4, 5,
Interesting.
6, and then Ohio State and Illinois would be the 4 and 5 seeds. So if
Okay.
you're the Big Ten, you're losing your conference championship game, which was, you know what? Penn State was obviously number 2 because they played Oregon. So let's say Penn State and Oregon got the 2 seeds to the college football playoff. Then that would mean Indiana would take on Iowa on conference championship Saturday, and Ohio State would take on Illinois for the right to get into the playoff. Now,
Okay.
that would certainly make for a really interesting Saturday. You add inventory, which is extremely important for your TV partners. The more games they can put on them, the bigger games they can make events will make a ton of money, and that's what essentially is the reason we've expanded the playoff in the first place.
Hmm.
So that's just as an example. For I guess we'll get into the Big Ten and SEC parts of this shortly, but I just think like I probably come off a little bit too complainy about a lot of things about college football just because it's so I like the traditionalist viewpoint on
Have you
it.
ever been on Twitter?
That's true. I'm nowhere near as bad as some of the folks on Twitter, but I do think there's a lot of fun that could come from this, and you could
Hmm.
like that Saturday where, yeah, you're gonna lose your conference championship game, You're going to get some really fun games with a lot of emotion trying to fight for the spot. Moving to one last question about this whole 16-team playoff proposal. It's clear that the Big Ten and the SEC are running this.
Mm-hmm.
At what would this mean for college football in your eyes if this proposal gets cemented in? Because for me, I think the Big Ten and the SEC saw an opportunity about a couple of years ago, saying, not only have we expanded, we have all the major brands except a few that are left in the ACC and the Big 12. We have all the leverage here. So if you guys want to stay viable as conferences, you will have to do anything we say. But as a college football fan, that just sounds icky.
Yeah, it does feel like they're kind of strong arming everybody else into what they want. I would have to imagine too, if you're in the ACC or Big 12, jumping ship would be maybe a little bit more advantageous for you. I think it's a lot more. I mean, like we just listed those six Big Ten teams. No disrespect to Iowa, but I don't think they're all that. And I think like if you're Notre Dame, you're looking at that saying, I can easily outperform Iowa every year. I can definitely make a top six seed. I'd rather do that than play my cards and play chances with the committee. Same thing in the SEC. I think the SEC might be a little bit deeper in the middle. If I remember correctly, it would have been some combination of like South Carolina, Missouri. I think those all that was part of the 5-3 clog, LSU. But I think if you're Clemson, you probably look at that in Miami. You look at that and say, I think I could make a top six there. So I do think that some of these teams are probably going to start doing the math and realize I would rather take my odds at finishing in the top six here than I would either trying to get an auto bid if you're Notre Dame, or sorry, the extra bid if you're Notre Dame, or if you're in the ACC on the outside looking in. So I do think some teams are going to see that and love that. Also, I could imagine like if you're a Clemson or a Miami and you lose, you're a one seed and you lose to four seed, whoever it might be in the ACC once, you're like, all right, I'm done with this. And you're going to pop on over, to the SEC and just go take your automatic bid with a 1-2 or take your chances in a 3-6 game. So I do think they're strong arming everybody. And I unfortunately do think it's going to work to the
Oh
benefit
yeah.
of the Big Ten and the SEC. I just don't see any leverage. No one has leverage over them right now.
No.
And the NCAA and the College Football Playoff Committee have not done a great job protecting themselves from this. And these conferences are really taking advantage of it.
It's one of those things where you can't reverse what's already been done,
Hmm.
and you see the trajectory of where we're going. The one of the bigger dates down the road after revenue sharing's passed, after several national championships and everything. I don't want to misspeak, but sometime in June of 2030, the ACC media deal expires, making all those teams essentially free agents. So the ACC has to give
Hmm.
Miami, North Carolina, Clemson, Florida State a reason to stick around and not jump ship to the SEC or to the Big Ten, and basically essentially form two power conferences like the NFL has with the AFC and the NFC. And at this point, it's clear who the power players are, and it's clear who the power players are. So that's the TV networks alongside the Big Ten and the SEC.
Yep.
It
They have all the power.
We've said this like 3 shows in a row. You just hope, for the love of God, that they get the right people in the rooms for those shows. I mean,
Put
for
us in
the
charge.
yeah, sure. I'll throw my hat in the ring. I know there's a lot of
I'll,
podcasters
I'll
out there.
apply on Indeed.
Yeah, exactly. We have some experience. We at least know college football in a way that as fans do, instead of as money comes in for like as a way to fill my pockets with money.
Yep.
In general, give me one or two words. What do you think about the 16-team college football playoff?
Better than 12 team, not ideal.
Ditto. I agree completely. Let's move to our next episode and our next installment of Snap Judgment. Da 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 da. We still don't have sound effects, so I'm going to hand it over to you, Jace. Let's get into the first topic.
All right. We got a little college football playoff semifinal rematch coming out week 1. Fox has already picked this game up. Texas goes to Ohio State, the shoe. Ohio State, 3.5 point favorites. It sounds like there's traction for it being maybe a big noon kickoff, maybe not. What are your thoughts on that? What kind of time slot are you hoping for, and what are you thinking?
To be honest, I'm weird as a fan. Early on in the season, I just want college football to be played, and I don't really care about the everyone saying big noon kickoff is was a problem last year with Ohio State having to play 6 straight games. I would probably think that it is going to be a big noon kickoff, just simply because of the nature of the game, how big that game is. And it is at Ohio State, which allows the network to air it fairly easily time wise. It,
Mhm.
I, I'm almost shocked at the number at 3.5. And
Yeah.
to me, I would almost think, okay, Ohio State lost their top 2 running backs. They lost most of their defensive line. They lost their quarterback. They lost both coordinators. I know they recruit like Ohio State. I know they have Jeremiah Smith, but they're favored by 3.5 against a team that has the best or the second best, depending on where you're looking, betting odds to win the national championship. Ohio State
Hmm.
beat them last year, but Texas is bringing in a new quarterback, and they lost several pieces. Sure, I'm I don't know. I would take the 3.5 on Texas side. Try to take the points and
I like that.
think it would. I, I'm shocked at the line. What do you think?
I'm shocked by the line too. I'm also, if that's what it would be, and that's at the day of it happening, I would probably also take Texas in that scenario. Also, Ohio State lost both coordinators, Knowles to Penn State, Chip Kelly, he gone. So I feel like, it might take a game, new coordinators, new quarterback, a lot of new running backs, a lot of new faces. It might take them a game or two. Not saying Ohio State's going to have a bad season by any means. I think they're going to be phenomenal still. They just won a national championship. But I think it might take more than one game for them to figure it out. And I don't know if Texas is the team you want to be figuring it out against. I think it's also going to be big noon. I would not be super thrilled about it. Like you said, it would be. I'm just happy to have football. But like that's a game I would love to be out Saturday night, 7 o'clock. With some friends at a bar, ready to rock and roll for that game. But luckily, that might not be the only good game we have early on.
No, we'll get to that. And I know I'm breaking the game, but I'm also trying to. This game's really
No,
interesting
I
to
love your
me.
thoughts.
This game's really interesting to me, but obviously the next game will have probably even more ramifications on the sport. Uh, Texas and Ohio State obviously aren't in the same conference. And so theoretically, this has no impact on whether or not they win their conference or how they go forward. You could say it's a measuring stick game, but you almost want the measuring stick games to be like week 3. So you've gotten your legs under
Yeah.
you. You've gotten some plays called for the new kids. We're gonna have Arch Manning likely as a Texas quarterback. Man, I don't know what it could mean, but imagine if Texas walks in there, it walks into the shoe, and I know they lost to them, but they finally get revenge. Week 1 with Arch Manning at the helm on Ohio State for the semifinal loss last year to start out Ohio State's national championship defending season. That would be ridiculous to me. The
Yeah, the Arch Manning headlines would be through the roof if he goes into the shoe and cooks.
it would be almost ridiculous. But I think there's another game that we're going to get into for Snap Judgment. That this one we actually might need like 10, 15 minutes on because have you and I have talked about LSU a lot. We've talked about
Yep,
Clemson a lot. Now LSU plays Clemson week 1 at night. I think it's at Tiger Stadium or
it
Clemson.
is. It is.
It's Tigers on Tigers. Clemson's a 2.5 point favorite. I don't know where to go. I think like I want to. I guess let's start with Brian Kelly. The Brian Kelly aspect of this. How many
Yeah,
is he ever going to
I'll
win a week 1?
no. I'll give you my snap judgment snappy. Clemson minus 2.5. I'm putting a month's rent on that thing, and I'm getting rich quick. I love Clemson in that. Oh my gosh, Javi Baez hit a home run, walk-off home run. I'm so sorry, podcast. That just happened in the window over there. I'm all in on Clemson here. Tigers, I'll take the Tigers there. They're going to beat the Tigers. There's too many Tigers going on right now. But no, I do love Clemson 2.5. I think they're going to steamroll, and so that's a very exciting thing for them. I think Cade Klubnik. This is kind of their year. It's going to be his presumable last year at Clemson. Dabo Sweeney. He's kind of brought that program. I mean, so it sounds weird to say back. It's not like they ever really left, but they kind of went from national championship contenders perennially to falling back a little bit. And then I think they're right back up there at the top. And we'll talk more about like where we have them in the grand scheme of things. But I think we're both on the same page that that's one of the best teams in the country. LSU comes into this game. I'm not a Brian Kelly believer. You've heard me say it on the podcast. If you know me and you talk to me about football side of it, you've heard me say it a lot for a long time. I don't think they win that game. They have a lot of great transfer portal additions. I just think it takes longer than a week to figure that one out. And then, like you said, different conferences. So does it even matter in the grand scheme of things? It might for LSU. LSU might be a team, I guess, looking to get one of those 3 final spots.
Let's just talking about the teams in general. Clemson, we expect them. This is their national championship make or break year. They will not be this good next year. Flat out, point blank, period. The way they recruit and the way that they don't utilize the transfer portal still to supplement their growth, it's forced them to basically use this as their window year. And they used to not be a window year team. They used to be, we're going to compete year in, year out. We're going to have the best wide receivers. We're going to have the best defensive line. We're going to have a top 3, top 2 quarterback in the country. It took them a while. They stuck with Cade Klubnik. They've had good years for most other teams' standards. They've had down years for Clemson standards. But they built it up for this year. Cade Klubnik is in his last year. He really, something clicked in his head or in his game last year where he had, I think he had a 36-6 touchdown interception ratio. He was on fire. This is probably the best Clemson wide receiver
That's
core.
nasty.
This is probably the best Clemson wide receiver
Antonio
core.
Williams back.
Yeah, they got every piece. And mind you, one thing that Dabo, outside of the transfer portal, has never really done is go outside of the program for his, not never, but rarely does, go outside of the program for his coordinators. So a couple years ago, he brought in Garrett Riley, brother of Lincoln Riley, to be his offensive coordinator from outside the program. And then this past offseason, he somehow poached Tom Allen, who wasn't a great head coach, but phenomenal defensive coordinator from Penn State, to be his defensive coordinator. So the alignment from head coach to coordinators to the amount of talent they have on that team, you and I we're going to really break this down later, so I apologize for doing this early. That makes this game so important to them. I know they're not in the same conference, but you can't start out this year with a loss in my mind. And I'm like you. I would take the 2.5. I would take 5.5, 6.5 for Clemson to beat LSU. I think
that's a multi-touchdown win for Clemson.
I think LSU is a phenomenal team. They have Garrett Nussmeier, who's been a great quarterback, and who's in line for a pretty big year offensively. There's question marks with LSU still about that defense. They wasted Jaden Daniels' Heisman campaign. You're telling me if they couldn't get like 2 or 3 more stops a game with Jaden Daniels, they wouldn't have been national champions with how prolific that offense was. And then last year was a whole lot of the same. And Brian Kelly, year after year, keeps losing to Florida State, to I forget who he lost to last year, in week 1, and slams the table as if something terrible happened to him. And it's like, buddy, you got to start taking some accountability. Some of it's on you. And they've been making a lot more changes this past offseason to get a lot of transfer help in. But I don't think Clemson's a team you want to play week 1. And I don't know. This is where I'm going to ask you, where's Brian Kelly's seat if it's a 1-score loss?
1-score loss, I think it'll be a little warm, but I think see the year play out. But if they get smoked, that thing is going to be red hot. I would also be curious to hear where LSU fans kind of stand on Brian Kelly, but I think from what I've like read in the news, it's this is not a make or break year as in the sense that he get fired, but this is very much a prove it year for him. I think LSU needs to make, especially if we're talking expanded playoffs, they've really got to make a playoff year. So we'll see. I we'll talk more about LSU. They do have the number one transfer portal class coming in, but it takes longer than a game to figure that out, where those pieces fall and how they fit into the grand scheme of things. And I just don't think Brian Kelly's that guy to go in to Clemson and knock off what's going to be a very focused and I think like ready to go Clemson team. This is a lot of continuity from last year to this year. A lot of talent on this roster. This is like one of those teams too. If you pull up a way too early 2026 NFL draft, you're going to see a Clemson logo all over that first round. So this is a loaded team that and of guys that have been there 3-4 years.
I guess the reason I asked the question in general of where's his seat, I personally think that his week one woes have been such a big deal that if he loses week one, doesn't matter by 3 or 50. All of a sudden,
It was USC last year,
it was
right? Was that
USC last
week
year,
one?
yeah.
Miller Moss, USC
Yeah. That was, yeah, before Jeremiah.
at
So
home. Yeah,
I just think if he loses week one, that it's a make or break game for him. Maybe the rest of the season's not as much. But
that's
I
true.
think that will set the tone to how the fan base and the national media and us will react to Brian Kelly in general. If you told me you were entering year 4 or 5 of Brian Kelly and he hasn't sniffed a college football playoff at LSU after the success he had at Notre Dame, man, they fired national championship winning coaches faster than that. I'm not saying he
Yeah.
deserves to be fired. I'm like you. I'm not the biggest fan of him, um, but this game itself feels like LSU's got to pull a rabbit out of their hat, in my mind.
Mhm.
Final question of Snap Judgment. I'm gonna turn it back over to you.
Final question. We'll go back to Bill Belichick a little bit here. What do you think the scenario is with him going into this season? Pablo Torres had a great quote. I'm going to read this off here. He said, I think there's a chance, and this is regarding Bill Belichick here. I think there's a chance, an absolute real chance, that he doesn't make it to week one with North Carolina. We have a little couple stats here, or not a stats, but one thing to note. Before June 1st, his buyout is $10 million. Dollars. After June 1st, only $1 million. Is he going to make it to the season?
So the season argument is the reason I was so fired up about this take because at work or with friends, we've had this conversation a bunch of like Belichick probably didn't want to wait around for the NFL coaching hiring cycle and maybe not get hired, and then all of a sudden there he wouldn't be necessarily shot out of the NFL, but there would be like proverbial door slammed on him for another year, and he would be
Hmm.
73, 74 next year. So in my head, when I saw these numbers come out when the contract was signed, was okay, the buyout's $10 million, but most coaches' buyouts don't fall within their first year that much. And I
Yeah.
thought his buyout falling to $1 million after June 1st in 20 days from now, that meant not someone with NFL team's going to hire him in July, but it would open the door for him next December if North Carolina is done playing football and he's recruiting, he's getting his next class together. If he starts having initial conversations with the next batch of NFL teams, I I think it's important to talk about why this has been happening, and we kind of brought it up last podcast about his girlfriend Jordan Hudson, the weird situation that essentially they've all been thrown in there. Before this story came out, Pablo Torres also reported that for a brief moment, Jordan Hudson, his girlfriend, was banned from the facilities. Like,
Yeah.
could you imagine the first lady of any program being banned from your facilities? There's has every program's every program's first lady, the wife of the head coach, or the girlfriend of the head coach in this regard, has a role with the program, whether that's like making cookies even, or like supporting mental health, or just being there, hang out. They're active. They're not there for the hours that the coaches are there, but
Mhm.
they're there a lot, and I just think like even if there was a little bit of truth, because North Carolina came out and said she hasn't been banned. That's not true. The story's false. Even if there's a little, like a smidgen of truth to her being banned from the facility, that's just
Mhm.
that's just gross as it is. And I know I've been going on for a while. I I just had to throw this into the rundown because the thought of him creating the whole moniker of we're going to have the NFL in North Carolina. We're going to teach these kids what it takes to become an NFL player. We're going to bring in NFL GMs, NFL cap people. We're going to be NFL but college. Bring in Mike Lombardi to be his GM. Bring in a whole infrastructure. I can't imagine North Carolina in July is like, okay, this is too much. We're going to fire you.
Yeah, same here. I don't think they would do that. It would be, I mean, especially with all the portal stuff, portals closed and everything. I mean, you would really screw over a lot of kids and your program firing a head coach this late in a cycle. I would be, I would actually, no, I should have done this. I wish I had. Go back and look at all the coaches over the course of college football history to see who's been fired in the summer leading up to, you know, uh, fall camp. It'd be
The
interesting to
only
see
one
that
I can
list. I
think
don't
of is the Northwestern coach, and that was because there were allegations against his program.
Yeah, that was like the hazing stuff.
Yeah,
That I can't think of any other time that had happened in our lifetime, at least. I would be pissed if I was a kid who just committed there, whether like recruit or even worse, a portal kid. It's like that's my final year. I wanted to go learn under Bill Belichick. Now he's gone. Also, the backup plan, would his son just take over? I know there was rumors of that he was kind of setting his son up. I don't know. I hate that this is even an option just because I think of how negative it would be to, the kids on the team. Also, as a fan, I would just be livid. Why mess around with this experiment just to kick them out the door that quickly? I don't think they'd do it. It seems too crazy. I feel like it's too much drama for Bill Belichick, but he's brought in more drama to his life than I ever thought he would have been comfortable with. So who knows?
I think that's the funniest part because if you think about who we knew Bill Belichick as the NFL coach, it was do your job, basically a curmudgeon with the media, a curmudgeon with everyone.
Yeah.
Never said more than like 3 words in a sentence. Like, man, it's just weird. I would say that
Yeah.
that's my biggest takeaway. It's just weird. And as a football fan and as a college football fan, I just wanted to see Bill Belichick on the sidelines coaching college football because I thought that would just be fun. So I
Hmm.
hope that that's not happening. That this isn't going to be a situation because it's not that Belichick will leave before the college football season, according to Pablo Torres. It's that North Carolina will have enough with him, and that would be nuts to me if you hire a
Yeah.
guy and like 7 months later you're saying doesn't matter how good you are, this is too much.
Yeah.
So, with that being said, I'm gonna take a little swig of water.
Yeah. Good call. I'm gonna do the same too.
We got a little bit of an awakening for our show, I guess you could call it. We're officially becoming a true sports show. Actually, Jace, there's one conversation we need to have before we become that, and I don't think it's for today, but I guess it's how does everything we've talked about affect LeBron's legacy? But
That's when we're official.
that's when we're officially a sports show. But today, spring ball is done, transfer portal's closed, teams are more or less set.
Yep.
Obviously, transfer portal is closed for kids jumping in, so teams can still pick up kids who are currently in the portal, but no one else can leave. We figured we would join the rest of the shows on Twitter, online, on YouTube, on everywhere, and create our own top 15 college football teams list. Now, this is how we rank them. This is how Jace and I see these teams and how they stack up this coming year. So, Jace, without further ado, let's get into your dark horses.
I like that. So quick context, the way I approach this, I really looked at it as week one, where do these teams stand? This is not my end of the year rankings. This is just week one, where do these teams stand? My two dark horses are TCU and Georgia Tech. I don't think we will see either of those teams on the top 15 when come week one. I don't think we'll see them in the top 25 come week one. But I love Haynes King. I love what Georgia Tech has done the last few years. I'm so sad that they lost Justice Haynes to Michigan, but I like a lot. I like Haynes King a lot, and I think Georgia Tech's a team that has a lot of continuity coming in from last year. I think they give a lot of good teams a hard fight. They did Georgia at the end of last year. Uh, I think that's a team that's going to be slept on. A lot of teams can't say they have experienced fifth-year quarterbacks, all five with the same head coach. They're one of the few that can. Similarly, similar mentality here. You probably can get my brain. TCU, Sonny Dykes with Josh Hoover. I love Josh Hoover. Third year there, uber talented. Put on a little weight. He was a little tall, skinny kid. It kind of reminds me of that Justin Herbert progression of like tall, skinny, big arm, kind of figuring it out. I really like what TCU's done, especially in the transfer portal. They buffed up the wide receiver room, getting him some weapons. They buffed up the defense heavily, which I mean, their defense was abysmal last year. They buffed that up in the portal. Reason why I'm in a dark horse, I think it'll take a little bit of time for that defense to figure it out. But if slash when they do, that's a team I would not want to face in the Big 12, wide open Big 12.
Georgia Tech's also one of those teams that they've gone toe to toe with every majors program that they've played in the last 3 years. They haven't won every single one of them, but they've gone to 8 overtimes or whatever that was against Georgia. They they play really tough physical football, and they will wear you
Yep.
down. And Haynes King, I can't believe he's still in college, but he's the type of guy that will truly like he this is his moment. It's his K Klubnik year too.
Yep.
Like he's experienced. He's been at Georgia Tech for long enough, and odds are this is the most ready he'll ever be to lead that team. So those are your two teams out of your top 15. My two teams, it might be controversial, but I have Tennessee and Florida out of the top 15. If you're going to say, what are you talking about? Tennessee made the college football playoff last year. Or what are you talking about? Florida sucked. There's no argument there. So just like Jace gave you a rundown, I didn't look at this as this is how teams ended the year last year. This is how I see their teams stacking up against the rest of the country and how I like them going forward. So Tennessee last year with Nico at quarterback, he was good. He wasn't great. And the defense really
Agreed.
led that team. And you normally don't like to think that a Josh Heupel team is led by their defense. And if you think that, that's because hopefully they're a national championship team because their defense is that good that it just trumps their offense a little bit. But that's not what the case was last year. Nico, we know what happened. We've talked about it extensively. Now they bring in the former App State quarterback who went to UCLA, who ended up in a trade essentially with UCLA for Nico. I think Tennessee has a chance to be nasty this year, and they could boost up way high in this list. I'm down on the fact that the quarterback's coming in after essentially spring ball with the team has to learn the offense in just like 7-on-7 practice with their teammates if they can. Have to learn who their teammates are, has to like meet everybody, like has to learn the system. It's just a lot. So I think they have a chance to be great. I don't know, so I'm going to take a wait and see approach on them. With Florida's a basket case of a team to kind of try to figure out. We talked about it last week. Billy Napier was fired essentially 6 times between week 1 and week 2. His job was saved. They started out abysmal. Graham Mertz, their quarterback, got hurt. They had to insert true freshman 5-star DJ Lagway, who was once again good, not great. Probably there's a reason he didn't start week 1 of his true freshman year. He has to grow a little bit, but they ended the year fairly well, which essentially at least guaranteed Billy Napier another year. Going into this year, everyone's back on the Florida hype machine. If DJ Lagway is who we think he could be, they could easily be in the top 10. The problem is there's so much uncertainty around that program that week 1, week 2 are so important to them for the rest of their season, for momentum's sake, for the fact that they have to play an SEC schedule, and it's still not an easy one. Last year they had one of the hardest schedules in the college football history, but it's not like this year will be that much better. And
And they play Miami out of conference early on too.
exactly. So I think Florida could vault its way into the top 15. I'm also going to take a wait and see approach. So my dark horse is Tennessee and Florida. Your dark horse is TCU, Georgia Tech. Let's go into your 11 through 15.
I like that. All right, I'll start at 15. We got Illinois at 15, LSU at 14, Indiana at 13. I got South Carolina at 12, and I've got Georgia at 11.
So Georgia, we'll get to once we release mine. Once we release the whole
Yeah.
our combo pod. Jesus, our combo list. I'm gonna pop the graphic now. Let's get into your top 10.
I like that. At number 10, I have Arizona State. At number 9, I've got Oklahoma. At number 8, I have Miami. At number 7, I have Notre Dame. At number 6, Alabama. 5, Oregon. 4, Penn State. 3, Ohio State. 2, Clemson. My number 1 team going into 2025, the Texas Longhorns.
And this is post spring, so you might change that decision by by July. Who knows?
Yep.
There's a lot to unpack here. I want to give everyone a chance to read this out, digest it. If you're watching on YouTube, the graphics up. Now let's get into my top 15. So at 15, I'm a little different. I have South Carolina. I have South Carolina at 15, Texas Tech at 14, Miami at 13, Illinois at 12, ASU at 11. Those might be controversial, but I'll show you why. At number 10, I have LSU, 9, Oklahoma, 8, Georgia. So that's where we differ already. 7, Notre Dame, 6, Alabama, 5, Oregon, 4, Ohio State, 3, Texas, 2, Penn State. And if you haven't been able to tell through the podcast up until today, number 1, I have Clemson. And this is where I think we're going to have the most fun. This is both of our lists. Let's chat about it. What are your initial takeaways?
Initial takeaways. I like our top 4. I think you can kind of argue for any of those teams. I always hate not putting the defending champion number 1. I feel like you just kind of earn that respect. I just losing both coordinators, losing a lot of talent. They still reload. I think we both probably felt it was hard to throw them at 1. Texas Clemson, I kind of went back and forth on. I'm all in on the Sark train this year. I think Texas is going to be hungry. I think they're going to be ready to roll, and they're going to prove that week 1 against Ohio State. Clemson, we've already touched on it, and I'll let you talk more about Clemson, why you put them at 1. I think they're probably just a step below Texas in terms of the tenacity and maybe like the skill style points that we're looking at. But I could see a world where Clemson's maybe a little bit more focused, might be the better word there. Penn State, I can never get behind James Franklin, man. It's just something about James Franklin that just I until he proves me wrong, I am going to keep doubting him because I've doubted him for however long he's been there, 6, 10 years, somewhere in that time frame, and he has never proved me wrong. And I'm going to keep doubting him until he does. So I had them at 4. I would have loved to put them lower, but they just have way too much talent for me to go any lower than 4. That 5 through 7 swing felt pretty easy. I don't know, just felt right off the hands making the list. Looks like you had the same feeling too. I'll hand it over to you to talk about your kind of top 7 there.
Yeah, so I it's funny you say that about James Franklin. I look forward to whether it's next podcast or 2 weeks from now or 3. We're gonna have a deep dive into what success looks like for Penn State. But I think foreshadowing, both of us will say either a deep college football playoff run or a national championship. This is the most
he's
ready.
at that point.
This is the most ready Penn State's been, and I personally believe Penn State, if they don't get it done this year, will James Franklin ever get it done there?
No, there's no way.
So they have the senior quarterback. They have a top tier running back. Their defense is stacked. They're the only thing that you still somewhat question is their receiving core, but they brought in a bunch of top tier receivers through the portal. So I almost put Penn State at 1. For me,
It's the best roster in football.
yeah.
I think it's the most ready. If you put any of those other coaches in I'll see in the top 15 with Penn State. I probably have them at 2 or 1.
Yeah. So in my opinion, I think if you have there's a lot of people who would argue that Jim Knowles to Penn State makes a massive difference for them. I would argue most of the time that would, but with Penn State, we've seen them go from Manny Diaz to Tom Allen to and not skip a beat defensively. Their offense, run by Andy Kotelnicki, they really started getting hot last year towards the end of the year. So I'm interested in how that's going to shape out. They should not leave the top four all year. And the only reason that they do,
100%.
the only reason they do is because they lose at home to Oregon in week 5. But
Yeah.
theoretically, go ahead.
I was that is a guaranteed top 3 roster worst case. You could easily tell me that's top 1, and I wouldn't be able to tell you any differently.
And for anyone who said, I know I have 14 other teams to talk about, but for anyone who said up to this point, James Franklin's overrated. Well, for every other year, he's had a good team, not an elite team. So maybe you could tell me that he was overrated, but I would have also argued that man, his team was just not good enough. Like there's no, like his team was good, but not good enough to be Ohio State or Michigan on those given Saturdays. With that said, this year, if they have even 2 or 3 losses, it's like what are we doing here at this point?
Hmm.
So that's Penn State. I almost put them at 2. I talked a lot about Clemson at the beginning of the year. I think they and they also have holy crap. I hope you don't hear all those dogs barking down the hall. Anyways, Clemson also has just an undisputed top 3 roster in college football.
Yeah.
I would also expect them to stay in the top 5, top 4 all year. They
Hmm.
play LSU week 1. They miss Miami, so you would essentially just
Oh,
think that if they start out in the top 3, they're going to stay there. Ohio State, I like you. I thought that how do you not put the defending champs number 1? Man, they lost their quarterback, 2 running backs. They lost their number 2 receiver. They lost a lot of their defensive line. They lost both coordinators. I fully expect Julian Sand to be good if he's their quarterback or whoever they choose to be their quarterback. I fully expect him to be great. And Jeremiah,
hmm.
they have the 2 best players in college football. So Jeremiah Smith
Yep.
and Caleb Downs, they have the 2 best players. So I couldn't really demote them that like in my head I was like they're not number 1, but they're not 7 or 8 either.
Yeah. It's so impressive to lose that much talent and that many coaches and still be like an undisputed top 5 team going into next year. That's hard to do.
So the most interesting part for me is the Alabama and Georgia. We felt the same way about Alabama. We both put them at 6.
Hmm.
And for those at home, we didn't like talk each other through our list. We just made them on our own, and so we saw them for the
Hmm.
first time together a couple hours ago. So we both put them at number 6. I personally think Alabama could be 1 at the end of the year, or they could be 14. It really
Yeah.
depends on who their quarterback is, but they finally feel like they're in a situation after spring ball, after this class, that this is officially Kalen DeBoer's team. It's no longer the guy who took over for Nick Saban. They have a lot of Nick Saban holdovers on the roster, sure, but this is Kalen DeBoer's team. Ryan Grubb, his longtime offensive coordinator and friend, is back with the staff. That's going to provide stability for Kalen. Um, I feel pretty confident that he's going to be strong and they could be pretty good. But why do you have Georgia at 11 where I have them at 8?
Yeah. That was a team that also had a lot of roster turnover between losing guys in the portal and losing guys to the draft. And I don't know how sold I am on Gunnar Stockton. And I was kind of looking through what their offense was going to be this year. I wasn't in love with any of the wide receivers. They got Zachariah Branch from USC, who I think is a good football player. I don't know if Gunnar Stockton's going to get him the football much. And Georgia just hasn't produced an elite level wide receiver in a little bit. It's been a little while since they've done that at the quarterback position. The running backs, they have like a lot of guys who were ranked highly out of high school, but just haven't produced at the college level in the way that some people expected. So I'm a little nervous for their offense because nothing about their offense gets me super excited, or even like, hey, I think I'm confident in this ability while they figure out the passing game or something. I think they're going to be trying to figure out the run game, the pass game, and that can be a little bit of a recipe for disaster. Defensively, they're going to be an elite defense. They're going to be one of those teams. They'll be in every single game they play, just because no one's going to score many points on them. But I do look at some of these teams above them. I don't think they would be able to score many points against Oklahoma. I don't think they'd be able to score many points against Alabama. Just thinking SEC. So I did dock them a little bit for that. The offense does give me pause. The defense is going to be elite again. So Kirby Smart will never have a bad defense. So top 15 for sure. That defense, I don't think will let them drop out of it. But that offense, I think, is going to be what keeps them out of that kind of that top six to me is kind of the tier one going into next year. So I think they just won't be able to make that jump until that offense proves me wrong.
I fully agree with that. I will say I just can't imagine putting Kirby Smart past 10. So I put him at 8.
Fair.
I think if anyone's going to pull a rabbit out of his hat, it is Kirby Smart. In the last 5 years, we've seen what he's done. Now, the team's certainly different. It really, really, really depends on what Gunnar Stockton is and how he rises to the occasion or doesn't. I
Hmm.
Last year they struggled with a lot of depth. They couldn't run the ball, and it really hurt them once it got down to like the big games. Obviously, losing Carson Beck, your starting quarterback, is never easy. But I can't move them past 10. But at the same time, is this the year that they win a national championship? I would probably say it's going to be tougher for them than the last couple of years heading into it.
Agreed.
What else is interesting? I got to talk about Oklahoma. Number 9,
I was just
Oklahoma.
going to say, I think that's the one that had the worst last year to be on our lists, Oklahoma.
Yeah. So this
6-6.
also, I would argue, this has the highest chance in both of our top 10. So we both put them at 9 to fall out of the top 10 pretty quickly and stay out.
I agree.
With that said, I'm pretty high on Oklahoma. They last year we went over it last week where they played some of their biggest games and their wide receivers that were available were almost their walk-on wide receivers, if not their walk-on
Yeah,
wide
it was
receivers.
unreal.
And
Unreal.
this year they brought in Ben Arbuckle and John Mateer, the OC quarterback combination. Um, I'm really high on, and they brought. I know this might sound silly, but I said this to you. I'm really high on the fact that Jim Nagy's their GM, and Brent Venables. All he has to do is focus on coaching. It's no
Yeah.
longer having to focus on all of the nitty gritties of being a head coach in college football today. It's he just focuses on coaching and addresses what Nagy wants him to do. I'm really high on Oklahoma.
Yeah, I am too. I just confirmed this too. They also brought in Jay Knott from Cal. So add him to the backfield with John Mateer. That is a massive step up from where they were at last year. I'm high on Oklahoma. That to me is going to be the most volatile team in here. There could be the one that would fall out, but they could also be the one I could see them easily surpassing Miami, Notre Dame, even one of those three Big Ten teams we have, Ohio State, Penn State, Oregon. I could see them taking a leap over one of those teams even. I think maybe Alabama and Texas would be an uphill battle for them, but I really like where they're at right now. And if I'm an Oklahoma fan, I'm beyond excited for the turnaround after having to watch that 6-6 team last year, what you're going into this year.
All right, let's get into a couple things before we talk about our top teams in the country. Um, Initially off the bat, I have Miami at 13. You have Miami at 8, and then we both have South Carolina on there in the teens. And uh, in as far as teams that one of us left out, I don't have Indiana on my top 15. And you don't have Illinois in your top. Oh, you have them at 15. So
They snuck in.
let's start with the Miami conversation.
Yeah, I think they're gonna have one of the best O lines in football next year. They return all five O line starters, which is pretty rare to do. I think you have Carson Beck gives you a little bit of a question mark at quarterback, especially coming off the UCL injury. We'll see where that goes. But I think they're in that position where they're going to be able to run the ball against anybody. And in the ACC, where you're going to get a little bit weaker defensive lines, a little bit weaker linebackers, the secondary is going to be a little bit smaller. That offensive line, I think, is going to be able to run through teams, and it's really hard. I mean, look at the Michigan national championship team. It is really hard to beat a team when they can just run it down your throat. And there's nothing you can do about it. So I think because of that, I like how that projects them out early in the year. I think that's a very safe way to play football when everyone's kind of trying to figure out where the moving pieces are going to go. They made a lot of strides in adding to the defense, and I think a run game can mask some of that. Hey, let's figure out the secondary. I also like that some of their tougher games are earlier in the season. I think when you can run the ball, you're a little bit more well equipped to win early. While, like I said, people are figuring it out. So getting like your Florida State early in the year, getting your Florida early in the year, getting your USF early in the year, I think that sets you up well to win those games. And I think that projects well for them early in the season. Now, when you get later in the season, and you do need to be able to come back against good teams, you do need to be able to throw the ball and make teams respect your air game. Then I start to get a little bit more nervous about Miami, like talking playoffs and maybe Clemson in the ACC championship game or something like that. But for the start of the season, I like where they line up.
See, I'm pretty much in line with you for half of that. I think Miami
Okay,
by the end of the year should be in the top 10 firmly and probably playing for a playoff spot. With that said,
definitely, definitely.
the argument that I made for Tennessee is I don't know how not Joey Aguilar, Jesus, the quarterback that just transferred in is going.
That might be right.
I mean, I thought that was a Texas Tech coach, but and
Joey Aguilar is correct.
okay, so I got it right. Sorry, it's we're recording this at night, so we're a little bit our brains are a little more
A long
fried than
day.
normal. Regardless, I can't make the same argument that I made for Joey Aguilar and Tennessee being out of the top 15 because I don't like the fact that the quarterback's going to have to learn essentially in non-physical practices. He's going to be playing 7-on-7s, just playing catch with his receivers. He's going to be introducing himself to his offensive linemen. I think Carson Beck's a little ahead of that, but he's also coming off of a pretty major injury. And
Yeah.
he's all things have been said by Mario. All the right things have been said that he's going to be ready for week one. But who knows? If he's not ready for week one, are they going to have the firepower to stick around? I think they got the reason I think that they could be in a playoff competition by the end of the year is by that point you hope that Carson Beck's ready. By that point you hope they're more gelled along the offensive line with the quarterback, with the receivers. Everything's smoother there. But also by the Miami misses Clemson on the schedule. They have tough games, but
Okay.
they miss Clemson on the schedule, so that's huge for them. They theoretically should have one of the three best odds to make the ACC title game, and we talked about this last week.
hmm
So I just couldn't move them up. I know that they will move up into the top 10 by week 3, week 5. I just right now I can't make the same argument with Tennessee that I and then I can't make the argument that I made with Tennessee and not make the argument with Miami at the same time.
Very fair.
Quick, quick couple things. Illinois, I think, is going to be really, really good. They're bringing back a lot of their team, and Brett Bielema is a good coach. I will say I think a lot of the hype on them being like the surprise team or being the Indiana this year is bullshit. They won 10 games
Yeah.
last year, and I think they're going to be good enough to beat everyone on their schedule outside of the great teams in their conference. I still think they're step too slow. Um, their arm strength's just a touch too small. Their defense is reacts a touch too slow. Like they're really really good. I don't want to buy into the hype of them being a playoff contender or a national title contender or a Big Ten contender until they go out and show us that they can beat the Oregons, the Ohio States, the Penn States of the world.
I completely agree with Illinois. I had them in their 15 because I think they'll start through that way, but I completely agree. I think that's kind of their ceiling.
And then I guess so we've talked about a lot of these teams. We have to have the number one conversation. Texas. I
Hmm.
didn't have them at 1. I put them at 3. I I think a lot of that is stems from the fact that they are replacing, I think, 4 offensive linemen, their quarterback, and several wide receivers alongside a couple of their defensive guys. Granted, they are allegedly, supposedly, what we think is going to happen. They're going to start Arch Manning, and what we think is that he's going to be very, very good.
Yeah.
Where are you with Texas? Why are they your number one over the more complete, I would argue, rosters today? Not week 3, but today.
Hmm.
Clemson and Penn State, I would argue, have a more complete roster than Texas does.
Yeah, I think they're first of all, I think they're in good position to beat Ohio State at the shoe week 1, which I think if you do that, immediate number one team in the country. So that kind of played into it a little bit. I really do think Arch Manning is going to ball out next year. I think he's going to be a very good quarterback. They lose a lot of talent on the offense, and that's what gives me a little bit of pause. But I think they have so much talent. They didn't even really touch the portal much because I mean, every guy in that program that comes up is 5-star, high and 4-star. That's been in the program for 2 or 3 years. They're kind of getting to that. I'm not comparing them to Nick Saban, Alabama, saying they're that good, but I think they're on that trajectory where it's just like that third man up is a 5-star. The fourth man up is a 5-star freshman. The fifth man up was a second year high end 4-star. It's just there's so much talent that's been in that program with Sark for 2, 3 years. So even though it's roster turnover, so to speak, it's not really going to feel like turnover for them when you have a guy who's been a 5-star on the bench for a year. He's learned the offense. He's ready to get his chance. And then defensively, they're going to be flat out nasty on defense. They return a lot of defensive starters. I think they had 11 portal commits, which is tied with Oregon for the second lowest in all of the Power Four. So that's always a good sign of we have a lot of guys in the roster we like, and they did not leave. We're ready to rock and roll with the guys we have. I think that shows a lot of confidence in your roster. And I really like what they're going to do on defense next year. I could probably give you like 12 names of just guys who are all probably going to be first, second round draft picks in their future that they returned from last year. So
So
I
yeah,
like where they stand. And the big thing is that Ohio State game. I think they're going to win that and shoot up to 1.
I've seen a lot of people online, not that it's right or wrong, say put Texas at 1 too. And look, by week 2, by before week 1, I could move them up to 1 too. I
Hmm.
just thought I saw everyone who moved them up to 1 just say Arch Manning's going to play. I'm like, I think Arch Manning's going to be good too. I don't know though. I
That's
don't know
fair.
how I've seen him play games, but what about how does he go through a year long season? So going into this, if I'm going to drop Ohio State to 4, I'm going to also drop Texas to 3 because the roster is better. They're elite, like you said, but I have to see the quarterback play 2 games in a row before I really before I'm like, oh yeah, that's no one's going to want to run into that team.
Yeah.
Clemson, we talked about, disgusting. Um, do you want to have the Oregon conversation?
Yeah, we could touch on Oregon a little bit. We could go way too long, so we got to be
I'm
cognizant
going to
of
keep
when
you
we're
to
touching on
one and
the
a half
Duckies.
minutes.
I like that. I'll try to go even less. Ducks at 5 felt very safe to me. I think they're a high floor team. They lost. I think they had 10 players drafted, but it's kind of similar to what I was saying with Texas. The guys that are coming up were 4 or 5-star guys that have been in the program for 2 or 3 years, and I think that's a very safe floor. I think that means you have guys that see their vision, coaches that see their vision. That's always a good sign. Players that want to be there, they're ready to go, next man up kind of mentality. Oregon, they have a slew of quarterbacks that look like they could all play day one, and their wide receiver room. I think, unlike most teams in the country, they have the most like solidified skill positions going into next year. Evan Stewart, DeCorian Moore, Justice Lowe. The list kind of goes on in the wide receiver room for them. And then running back room, I think you kind of retain Noah Whittington. You bring in Malachi Hughes, who is kind of coveted as the best transfer portal running back. And like I said, they didn't touch the portal much. They tied for second least portal bring-ins of the 2025 offseason. And I think that's a good sign of roster health. They were one of the youngest teams in college football last year, so you bring a lot of experience that's going to come back ready to go. You kept both coordinators. That's hard to do in today's college football. I think I'll pause there. I think they're a very safe 5, but they have the Dante Moore situation that I think keeps him from being higher.
Yeah, I think the biggest question with them is the same question we have with Ohio State, it's the same question we have with Texas is we know the quarterback's highly touted. We've seen him play here and there in games. Is he the real deal? If he is,
Yep.
dude, I would take Oregon, Ohio State, or Texas over Penn State and Clemson today. But
Yeah.
I think that's the only reason I had him at 5. I've seen other lists have him at 9 or 12. I'm like, that's ridiculous. The roster is way
Yeah,
too good,
that's
and they should be able to win games just by running the ball. If if like the quarterback's not in a good spot either. But we've seen Tez Johnson, we've seen Oregon players and coaches basically talk about how good Dante Moore is, assuming he'll be the starting quarterback. I'm optimistic on that team. We'll just have to see week 1. I believe Montana State is,
yeah.
and then they have Oklahoma State. So they don't have a murderer's row to start the year. They do have, but it won't be like a cakewalk either.
Yeah.
Long story short, I said this about every team, but this is kind of the fun part of talking about the top 25 or top 15 this early in this process is I think they could bump up, but at the same time, we'll just have to wait and
hmm
see on their quarterback.
Yeah. For both of us, that 5 through 8 is QB question marks. So you could probably
Exactly.
label all 5 of those teams or all 4 of those teams that way.
Exactly. So, one last look at our top 15 post spring. Jace's top 5 includes Oregon, Penn State, Ohio State, Clemson, and his number 1 team, Texas. My top 5, I also have Oregon, Ohio State at 4, Texas at 3, Penn State at 2, and Dabo Sweeney, don't fail me now. I have you at number 1. So, that was fun. We're officially a sports show now. Of course,
We have a top 15 list.
we have a top
Josh
15
Pate,
list.
who? Just kidding. We really like your content.
Yeah, we love your. I'm wearing a white shirt. I didn't even plan that, but that was fun. I think in general, like lists and stuff like that. Well, that list is going to be so prone to change. Come
Oh, yeah.
like come July, come August, once we hear more about teams, once unfortunately injury reports come out, we'll find a way because we had definitely some differences in our top 15s. Once we have our flag for discussion poll, the FFD poll, or whatever we want to call it at the time, we'll find a way to build a consensus top 25 and release that week
I like
after
that.
week. But we'll have our individual ones as well. Well, I think that's where we'll wrap it. As always, follow us on socials. Twitter, F for discussion, YouTube at flagged for discussion, TikTok at flagged for discussion. If you follow us at those platforms, maybe you'll get to see a fun tweet like this. Um, this was tweeted out literally yesterday from our from Jace, which our Twitter account followed up, reposted, and I want to follow up also on our homework assignment that we gave our viewers, Jace. If I said it at the beginning of this podcast, let's. If you're listening on Apple Podcasts, if you're listening on Spotify, if you're listening on Audible, if you're listening anywhere on the phone that's not YouTube, there's a little place in there that you can give us a little ratings review. I want to see how far up we can just take that. We're slowly, as we said, on the rise to 50 subscribers on YouTube. Maybe Jace has changed his mind, but we mentioned maybe we'll give away a toaster to one of our one of our 50 subscribers. But I really want to see how we can impact on the podcast platforms too. I know
Yeah.
my brother took my dad's phone and he's following and commenting on our social media. So I'm not gonna be the one to deal with any backlash. So if you would like to take your parents' phones and comment and subscribe and like, I'd like that too. That'd be fun.
Anything you can do to support, we gladly appreciate. And as always, Interact with social medias, reach out to Farbod and I with any thoughts, feedback, ideas. We're always growing, we're always learning. This is something that we love doing. It brings us a lot of fun, and kind of something that gives us not only an outlet to have fun, but also to work a little bit and stay, involved in our hobbies, which is always a great thing to do. So any feedback, comments you have, we're all ears, and we're gonna keep this thing going. So whether you like it or not, this thing's gonna keep on going.
This train is rolling, and unfortunately for us, for today, the train's coming to an end. My name is Farbod Merkazi. He's Jace Hatfield. This has been Flagged for Discussion.